Good afternoon. In first place, I want to thank all to be here, and I want to address a special thanks to Dr. Anabela Mesquita for her invitation for me to be here today, also to Paula Pers and to Dr. Alexandra Albuquerque. I would like to present, I will present some aspects of my postdoctorate research that I am developing in this area, the simulator of business environment technology based in innovative methodology in teaching learning process, in the assessments and in teaching and in the relation teacher-students versus student-teacher. These strategies are already in implementation here at ISCAP since the year 2003. I will present the grounds of the problems, where I'm going to identify some of the aspects that are the scope of my choice in my postdoctorate research. Then I will present the theory in these 6 points here designated. Then I will present our model of simulator in use at the course of accounting and management, and the new pedagogical approaches that we use already, some that I would like to be in use very, very soon in our classes, and to the end, some reflections, because this is an ongoing work, so we can get conclusions from here. In his book, The Ignorant Master, Jacques Rancière said that the act of learning could be reproduced according to 4 dimensions diversely combined. It can be by an emancipated master or by a heartless one, by a wise master or an ignorant one. So I put here these questions because I think that many people still confuses the are we teachers educators? Are educators also teachers? I hope I will be answered this question throughout my presentation. Until the year 2008, our Ministry of Education attributed the award to the best Portugal teacher of the year. In the last year of this award, 2008, Jacinta Oliveira, a teacher at Carolina Micaeli School, was awarded. On 5th October, we celebrate the Teacher Day, our day. And the TSF radio, national radio, interviewed Jacinta Oliveira and asked her opinion, what defines a good teacher? And she answered this way. And the 3 of them must be implied. So for me and for her, and I put here her question because I'm subscribed to it, a good teacher must have an extensive knowledge of the contents, must love her profession, and must treat the students with humanity. The present works, besides characterizing the teaching of the innovative model of simulation that supports learning, is oriented to the study of competencies that students of this course must have at the end of the training processes, using an effective process of assessment. We also intend to propose the new pedagogical approaches, beside this one, to use in the classroom all over Europe, and why not all over the world. In the book, The 7 Knowledge Necessary to the Education of the Future, Edgar Morin highlighted some aspects that this theme, namely the question of how education gives knowledge, provides knowledge and knowing, but still formed by curricular units, teaching isolated. Teaching must have a multidisciplinary character, and so that students has a knowledge of a whole and not only of the part. This is essential. The business environment of technology-based information of competencies in accounting emerges of the necessity that elapses from the different pressures to change that on the last decades have been felt, whether in the plane of business work, in the accounting, in the didactics, and of the access to the professions related with management. The changes in the business world and the globalization introduced new ways of managing, new ways of the organizations to relate with each other. So, about this thematic, there was a lack of guaranteed sustainability solutions. I've studied and I've learned many studies, and proliferated studies and diagnoses, but there are two insufficient. The practical application that not passing of mere traits and experiments become unified in solutions that of guaranteed sustainability. As one once said, rivers not crossed with projects of bridges. If you don't have a bridges and only a project, we can cross the river. Only if you can swim. This is why the appearance of a new model of formation of competencies based on quality and oriented to the excellency. It's our understanding that the best combat to academic failure is to give the students the reasons and the pride and the pleasure to be in the classroom. Also, the teacher must have a different training, a different formation supported in the new technologies of the real markets and not the technologies only given by the school. Because the teachers are the important one here. This model, or this studied model, gives and underlies the permanent combination between quality and innovation. I brought here this equation presented by Professor Pedro Saraiva that excellence is the multiplication of a square innovation with quality. That to reveal the interdependence between the concepts of innovation and quality in education. The main objectives of the higher education today should pass by teaching students to think critically and not to memorize small facts, to reflect about the themes and to bring up questions, to develop the capacity of imaginative narrative and the ability to decipher meanings, to form future citizens able to live in an era of cosmopolitanism, and so to create a community that ratiocinate together to solve the problems in the Socratic manner, and not only to confuse education with the strict preparation for a profession. So, that's why we defend that the teaching and learning methodologies must have an emphasis in the reflexive practice, allowing that the students experience the phenomena of real life while still they are in the teaching environment, accompanied by the teacher, of course. The great classical thinkers that who have studied the problems of education said and repeated it, it's up to the teacher to pass to the students what mankind has already learned about herself and nature, and she has created and invented of essential. One of the main papers reserved to the education consists that she must indeed make each one take his destiny in his hands and contribute to the progress of the society. UNESCO defines the 4 pillars of educations. Learning to acquire the understanding instruments, learning to and have the power to act upon the surrounding environment, to participate and cooperate with all other human activities, and learn to be. This is an essential pathway that integrates the background. These 4 pillars are to be considered as essential based on higher education, allowing the creation between theoretical knowledge and practice, and giving education a higher fullness of the realization of the person who it is entirely learns to be. The IASB, International Accounting Education Standards Board, divided in phases the process of accounting education. Of course, the initial professional development and the continuing throughout life. And it creates programs in accounting based in these 4 pillars, if you want. The first one, there must be a comprehensive education that is able to fit the need of the accounting professional. The schools must have programs certified by the FACT, International Federation of Accountants, and the professional experience must be relevant to the profession of managing. And formative and summative tests in order to assess the skills and capacities that students have acquired throughout this process of teaching and learning. Being clearly insufficient to enrich the curricula of the superior courses of the area, with the model of simulator, it is imperative the adjustment of the teaching and the assessment strategies. We consider fundamental to change, and why not revolution, the actual programmatic contents and methodologies of teaching and learning existent to the approach by competencies. That school has the main purpose to develop in students the critical reflexive thinking, the making the students able to analyze, to decide, to plan and communicate their ideas. The discussion around the use of the technologies has not been peaceful, particularly in the construction or reconstruction of the relation school, students, teachers and surrounding environment. So we believe that the technology is a tool that must serve to the development and application of satisfactory solutions, realistic ones, desirable and achievable, for the practical problems involved in the actual universe. This means that use of the technologies in the education has been rising some questions, namely in the evolution of the existing pedagogical relations. Also, as the technological capacities are available facilitate the efficient gathering of information, make less necessary than before the formation centered on contents. The teacher is now a mediator of information and a supporter of the process of learning at the classroom. But still, some teach accounting building up on informatics, and others teach informatics using accounting examples. Students must be able to conceive, to understand, to operate and even change when faced with these, both in teaching and in professional lives. The technology must be a commonplace to the one of the teacher, in the curricular units eminently practical, and real tools should be used and not manipulated one or created solely for teaching. Technologies should not overlap the education. This risk in its use lies in this fact. In this sequence, there have been new approaches in teaching in these areas that I will try to transmit to you. Sorry, I put this very late. This is here to show that informatics is in the basis of the education training and not the upside. It's a mistake to do that so. The simulation and the games, I will excuse to talk about them because they are of general knowledge. I will talk about the professional internship or stage if you want. Normally the professional internship is integrated in the last year when the students have the knowledge to apply in the practice and the organizations and so on. I defend that the internship must be used along the process of formation since the first day the students enters in the classroom, and there must be an internship or professional internship or stage of observation, giving the students the reflexive thinking and the possibility to see how things work in the real practice and come to school and reflect with the teacher in the unit, in the curricular unit for it, and that the students learn how the things are different many ways. At last, it's my conviction that strategic training of observation and critical reflection must be an approach to teaching learning processes. This is the model of simulator. I will only emphasize some things about it. Although we accept that in certain curricular units it may be useful, the resource to strategy of games or simulations, we defend that the complete training of competencies in our course requires an availability of a simulator that promotes the development and maintenance of the business reality, to be in the place of the professional that gives the support that management needs. The student in our simulator is the manager of its own company. He is the one that makes the decisions. So is an intervention on the processes. The teachers themselves responsible for monitoring the curricular units do so on a different approach, dealing directly with real tools of the technologies available in the field of communication and information, and being their function the guidance permanently ensured. I had a lesson today in the morning, and I must evaluate the students. I enter in each companies. They work in groups of companies. They are free. And till Monday, I must see in all the companies what they have done, and I give them the feedback, what they have done or not done, where are the mistakes. There is a permanent feedback. This is essential for me. The feedback be permanent because I think that we, in our lives, learn with our mistakes, so the students do so. In summary, this model, not only in the curricular units at the end of the course, particularly those of business simulation, but essentially in the others that, framed in business sciences, need a pivot environment that ensures the extent of knowing to the action in a common context, duly completed with evaluation. Now I will pass to the concept of competencies, and competence through ideales as chaves should be developed through practice and based on knowledge. According to this author, the emphasis that must be on the practice is on praxis, like she says. We'll now present a few authors that you may know. Le Boterf, Philippe Pernot, Rey, that refers the competence as a capacity to mobilize several cognitive resources to cope with various situations. Philippe Pernot, one of the authors that mobilize the idea of competence as an overall of education in terms of their improvement, defines the competence as a knowledge in use. Despite all the discussions and lack of concepts of what is a competence, what defines it, I chose this tribe designated by GCA, knowledge, skills and attitudes. Isabella Lercon summarizes that this is very important to me. The professional competences implies knowledge in a situation, in an action, an holistic one, a creative, personal, constructed, a knowledge that depends, among other things, of the capacity of the professional to appreciate the value of his decisions and the consequences resulting therefrom. These are the proposed competencies by the studies of international organizations, and in the following PowerPoints I will give the communication skills or competencies through the use of the pedagogies shown by discussions, case studies, oral presentation, the competence of to resolution of problems with alternative solutions, the ethics with the group work and discussion, the technical ones, the observation stage, visits to different enterprises of different areas of activity, not only commerce but also manufacturing and so on, and self-evaluation. The interpersonal with group discussions and research projects, later on I will talk about them. Conception, implementation and practical use of the information systems. Integrated information systems, it's very important. And decision making by problems with different solutions, simulations, games, a work group of course, and research projects. Now I will talk the assessment and the competency approach based and the changes in the process of the assessment. Azevedo defends that learn to intend outcomes on a reasonable, effective way, then the main task of the teacher is to lead the students, but it is useful to remember that what the student does is indeed more important to determine what is learned and what the teacher does than what the teacher does. Asset skills at school is to mark a rupture with the assessment practice that favor the acquisition of disciplinary knowledge, emerging in this logic that the defense of a formative evaluation, as Alves e Machado defends, putting at the center of their concerns a student who, throughout his pursuit of learning, becomes the protagonist of its own learning. So, we must bear in mind that the evaluation procedures must be well outlined in pedagogical practices, so the things will not work. And the ones that best identify with skills assessments are the ones that lie within a formative and forming logic, while as they are oriented toward a self-regulator assessment or self-evaluative of the individual process of learning. According to Cardinet, the evaluations or assessment serves as a guide to action. The evaluation exercises a regulatory function of learning, and therefore that, as pointed Philippe Pernaut, regulates the work, activities, relations of authority and cooperation among students. Therefore, the assessments in a curricular oriented towards skills training is not organized in function of the thematic sequences, but according to the manifestation of the desired competencies, as Roldan defends. Presenting the simulator. Before presenting a small movie about one of my classes, I will show some differences between traditional teaching and where we must be. I put here some of the aspects that I consider more important, and outlining the fact that in the traditional teaching, teacher has a central role. The contents to develop is the task of the teacher. The teacher involvement is very high. The involvement of students is very low. The attitude toward teaching is I want to teach. The pedagogical techniques are mainly expositive. The learning process is cognitive. The application of concepts is only in theory. And the other, where we should be, is learning, the central role given to the students, the contents to develop by the students, the low involvement of the teacher as a mediator and a protector to take care of the students. I think that the teacher should take care of the students. And the attitude, I want to learn. They work in group is the pedagogical technique, the essential one. The learning process, besides cognitive, is also affective, groupal, attitudes, behavior, is practical, and the learning evaluation assessment is done by the students. And the environment classes is competitive on the traditional, and in ours is of cooperation. Now I will, present, if it works. It doesn't work. Okay. Why this model? Why the simulator? the superior courses of accounting are administered most exclusively in the polytechnical schools oriented to the profession. So the model of the simulator of business environments emerged as an alternative to the professional internship, concentrated in the 2 last semesters of the first cycle, and one of the 2 curricular units in the whole course of practical laboratorial character. The global characterization of the simulator for you to understand a little of what you saw in the movie. The integration of the TICs in its dual role as mentor and facilitator. The priority to interaction with a strong reaction dynamics in a network in the global market. The presential execution subject to the real calendar. The teamwork. The learning supported in a high systemic complexity based on a global network by processes. The whole and not the part processes. Okay? The availability of professional tools that are used in business world. The subject as a comprehensive system. The multi-dimensional treatment of the information oriented to the support of the decision making. I defend it strongly that our students are not to be prepared to be accountants. They must be prepared to be side by side with manager, supporting the decision making. Training the autoscopy technique. The assessment of electronic basis in every sessions with feedback, and remote access to the company, because the students must study at home. The student cannot do anything at home. He can study at home. And supported of 2 teachers in all sessions. The main goals of the simulator is oriented in training to the market levels more exigent, prepare the professionals to more specialized functions, the development of the new competencies, stimulate the capacity to organize, to research and reorganize information in an integrated environment, and to train and promote the working group and of cooperation. Still, to achieve the capacity working under pressure, to activate the capacity of the decision making, the communication capacity, familiarize the student with the organizational structure, consolidate professional, personal and ethical attitudes, it's very important for us, and to promote a management by quality. The environment of this simulator. There is an enormous complexity of management conceived on a work relation, oriented on a perspective multi and interdisciplinary. The student must do some tasks, prepare a contract work, so they must go to the law of work, and they must know if the contract is well done, and so on. The multi and interdisciplinary use. Business formats, subordinated to a real calendar. They pay the taxes on the same days that the companies of the real world does that, and with enormous workloads. The students almost we must push them throughout the class, because sometimes they cannot manage to work under pressure, and we must instill them that, because in the real market they will have pressure. The assessment in the simulator. The different components of the assessment. Continuous, as I said, session by session with feedback given to the student. With further assessment of behavior performance, with a strong ethical component and attitudes. If the students of mine, if I hear a telephone message in my class, that student is in the class 3 hours, but he will have a 0 in their participation. We call them negative behavior, because when students come in the classroom, they have 100% of the evaluation. If some of these ethical components and attitudes fails, the students will see this participation diminished. With the support of the electronic means involved, and including the negative behavior, and include the agent involved in charge of the students. The new approaches. Suarez, that's me, with another name, present problems in pedagogy in higher education of accountants and administration. I have identified that a set of pedagogies that are already used by teachers in the classroom, but we must be alert to the fact that students forget too easily what they memorize, which leads that the acquired knowledge become easily outdated. So they become inadequate to the problems that they have later on to confront it in the professional lives. I criticize the fact that teaching of accounting is spending more time to the transmission of contents than that which is dedicated to support students in developing skills, because those skills will enrich their lives and make them successful professionals. The pedagogies or tools or forms of work, how do you want to call them, are already used in many classrooms, but not in a systematic manner, and are often used in the wrong way, what creates in the students discomfort and mistrust in these learning projects. So we must change it. Here are the pedagogies that I will bring up to you: the works in real companies, the analysis of cases, the exercises with feedback, the theory, the oral presentations, book reading and something else, role-playing, group work and technology support. I will present the pedagogy, the objective, when to use that kind of pedagogy, and then when and where to use, and how we use here at our simulator. So I will begin. I put this, but I always forgot about this. So the pedagogy, the objectives of using that pedagogy, when to use, and the simulator, what we use. First of all, the works in real companies. The main objective is to facilitate to the student the real work environment. When to use in the professional internship, along and at the end of the formative process. Here in the simulator, along the course, we use in real companies, but simulated one. The analysis of cases is to stimulate in the student the reflexive and critical thinking of the resolution of problems. When to use during classes, to be held in group, preferably, and presentially. It is very important. Here, we do it always and by processes, with critical reflection at the beginning of all sections. In the beginning of any session of the simulator, a company is claimed to be to the teacher's place and to reflect some questions that we pose the students the previous lesson. So there is the critical reflection, and also we are developing also the communication skill. The exercises with feedback, the objectives to provide to the students the resolution of the problems, placed to them and motivate to find new solutions. When to use during the classes, to be held individually and outside the classroom, always with the feedback by the teacher. Here is an ongoing process with feedback from session to session, as we already saw. The theory must provide, obviously, the students with the required contents for the development of predefined competencies. When to use, before put the student challenges to apply this knowledge received in the practice. Here, the explanation of the theory is to underline the tasks that the students must perform in the class, in that specific class. The oral presentation, and I defended that they should be in different languages. The objective to support the students in the systematization of the information and for oral presentations and development of the communicating competencies. When to use, most of all I defend during the classes, after the analysis of a problem and based on the acquired knowledge for subsequent oral presentation. In the simulator, our students make 4 oral presentations, 2 in each semester. The book reading supports manuals. The objective is to motivate the students to read, to facilitate the acquisition of new information and the taste for reading, and develop communicative competencies, oral and written. Because when I read, I will get new words, so I will be richer in my vocabulary. When to use during the classes and outside the classroom, always framed in the teams that to be developed at moments. The simulator, we have supporting documentation to the sessions. The documents that we call them ACE are support documentations, the processes, and the manuals, the slides in all sessions. The role-playing, to develop in the students the ability to communicate, to bond with others, leadership and conflict resolution. When to use, during the class, always mediated by the teacher and framed on the teams to be developed at moments. Here, in the oral presentation of the company, of a team, the students must respond to the questions of the other colleagues and of mine. And they here do a role-playing because they are defending his perspective. Then, in the final report, they use the same strategy, role-playing. Work group, to develop in students' relational, ethical, behavioral competencies, and I think that I should put there the leadership, because in a group work there's always someone that leaders becomes the leader. During the classes to be used in the simulations since the first session. Outside the students must do some works, but the work group functions outside and in the classroom. Works with the technology support. Objectives to use correctly the information technologies and instill in students the information search to support the development or resolution of problems during the classes whenever possible, and here in the simulator in all classes or sessions. The films, videos and music to motivate the students to use various tools for oral and written communication. When to use during the classes whenever possible, and in the simulator whenever necessary. Written works in different languages. This is to mobilize the students to the necessity of using the English language, Spanish and other ones in various disciplinary fields. When to use them? Now in foreign language classes. and whenever possible in the Romanian areas. In search for information, it's an example of it. In the simulator, we oblige to the students to bring news in English and to written about this news. And then in final report, they write a firm brief in English, and they are not obliged to present them in English, but we encourage them to do that. Why it is, if we believe that there is still too much theory, we continue to support us in it. This is a question made by Albrecht and Sack. For me, the solution of this problem is in the balanced combination, and why not perfect, between the theory and the above mentioned pedagogy or others, once the critical competencies rarely became obsolete and are usually transferable throughout the life of the students. This is, thus, for me, it's urgent to find solutions whose primary objective is to integrate these skills in the curriculum of the courses of the various areas of knowledge. The same authors, Albrecht and Sachs, said that we lost too much time to rest in our own traditions and always look to the past when we should have been teaching for the future. With the right direction and the dedication and work, accounting education has a bright future, and that future depends on the action that we take now. The changes have been insufficient. All cases studied by me, of course, are focused on the change of one or another name of one or another discipline. The changes must be above all these changes. These are the studies that the organization studies that I have studied: the European Union, the CNAS, the UNCTAD, the World Bank, the Bedford Committee, the American Accounting Association, among others. And they defined, they converge in several ways. In the objectives of the teaching, they define the multidimensional and systemic, transversal information, support to decision making, transparent, universal, and mobility. The contents. It should be emphasized what has been forgotten, namely the teaching on the information systems. The contents should be comprehensive, inter and multidisciplinary, real and not theoretical ones, flexible in order to allow the insertion of flexibility, global. This is applicable to the world and not only to the country where we are teaching. The structure must be conceptual and technical, with integrated combination and profound of the theory and the practice. They defend 3-5 years structure of the courses. The methods. Use active methods to develop the active and critical students, such as simulations, work groups, self-study, rotations, work school, discussions of cases, among others. Evaluate what? The school, on one hand, and students, in this case. Do not forget to access competencies at other levels and not only the ones related to the area. The teachers are the agents of change and individual support to the students. The school must innovate, must have a close relation with the surrounding, and must develop strategies to compete in the same environment. As Cristóvão Buarque refers in the book The Fourth Dimension of the University, he says, this is a little of my poetry that I bring to you. These answers and questions, he said, which must be made at these moments when the university coexists with a revolution as deep as the Gutenberg and Humboldt together, how to look from above without losing contact with the base, how to be global without losing the overall feeling, how to define quality when the things are changing so rapidly, how to use the methods of mass education and the distance learning without losing the immense power of the teacher-student relation, how to be of all without ceasing to identify and respect those with more talent, more persistency and more vocation, how to structure oneself multidisciplinary without losing disciplinary efficiency, how to act without ceasing to reflect, how to be both ethical and technical and artist, and how to be one and how to be many. This is why, with these approaches to the teaching learning process and with the simulator, acts as a pivot space in a systemic approach by processes in inter and multidisciplinary nature. Only a didactic based on a model of the simulator can allow full acquisition of the basic competencies and the relationship with knowledge with the practices. With the launch of the European Year for Development, the European Union, for me, makes clear that its commitment to education as a vehicle for sustainable development and on the long term. Its position is further enhanced by the support guaranteed to the European teachers throughout tools and techniques mentioned in this study, pedagogies, and the urgent need to put into practice in the classrooms. I would say not between 15 and 24, but between 3 and 94 years, because I think that the higher school must be in this project too. The European higher education area represents an unmissable opportunity to take a significant step towards the design of European convergence. And for me, what is needed is to grow wisdom in the consciousness of those who rule higher education, so that they understand that this European network presents different shapes and unfilled spaces, unforgotten spaces, and that Europe Global Network do not hurt the uniques of each school and of each students. The last reflection that I leave here, and is the first that I leave to my students in the first class, is an affirmation by Pablo Picasso. I'm a fan of it, of him. This is at the right, the mother and child painting of his of 1921, a masterpiece. And at the left there is one of the many drafts that Picasso did to get the masterpiece. So I always tell my students, you must first learn the rules like a professional, because so you can break them like an artist. And this up to us, teachers and educators, the task to fill this gap here, to help our students with the rules so they become professional, but we want more of them. We want that besides they are professional inside the rules, they must be an artist in their profession. And that's the step, and that's the where our students will find the difference and the competitive and will be competitive in the marketplace. So it's our role as educators and teachers to place our teachers in the artists. So if you have any doubts, my contacts are here. Thank you for being here. Thank you.